Week 1 of the NFL season, it's finally here. Congratulations, we made it. Now what we have to do is make these tough start-sit decisions. So I'm going to give you 6 wide receivers that are potentially on the edge this week in week 1 that I feel confident in starting. And I'm going to give you 3 wide receivers that I personally think you might need to sit here in week 1. Again, these are not obvious guys that I'm going to tell you to sit. I'm trying to go a little bit deeper into, these options to give you start sit guys. So number 1, the first guy that I am confidently starting this week is Christian Kirk. He faces Washington. And look, in fantasy football, what is it really about? It's all about opportunity. Okay, Christian Kirk is going to be heavily targeted in this offense after getting the bag in free agency. In their preseason game versus the Steelers, Kirk had 5 receptions on 8 targets for 54 yards at halftime, guys. And the Steelers were playing their first team defense. You might think Christian Kirk was overpaid in free agency. You might be annoyed at the number that he got. But for fantasy purposes, we don't care what he's making. We just care what his opportunity is. They're going up against Washington. Last year, the Commanders gave up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. As a Washington fan myself, look, I feel like this defense is going to be a liability all year, specifically right now in the linebacker and secondary rooms. You've got Cameron Curl, who is one of the best players on defense for us in that secondary, who's dealing with an injury. Don't forget Chase Young still will not be playing just yet as he recovers from that ACL. So you should be starting Kirk with confidence this week. He's going to get a ton of opportunity, a ton of targets. If I have him in my flex spot, I'm feeling really, really good. The second wide receiver that I believe you can start with confidence is Hunter Renfrow versus the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers were actually really, really good against fantasy wide receivers last year. They actually only gave up the 4th fewest points to that position. Now you're bringing Khalil Mack, JC Jackson, Sebastian Joseph Day. This defense could be even better. And as for Renfrow goes, he goes being a top 10 fantasy wide receiver last year to potentially the 3rd option in this receiving core now. So why am I telling you to start Hunter Renfrow? This game is going to be a high scoring game in that AFC West division, which is going to leave the defense in LA focusing on who? Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, which means what I believe is that Hunter Renfrow is going to be in some very favorable scenarios out of the slot position. That chemistry that he already has with Derek Carr, he has a safe floor this week if you're looking for a flex option. I would say 12 points you can anticipate. If he gets a touchdown, you can maybe see around a 15 to 17 point game. So with confidence, again, as a flex option, I am starting Hunter Renfrow. The 3rd wide receiver that I think you should be able to start is Bobby Trees or Robert Woods. They play the New York Giants this week, and this is not an anti-Treylon Burks take at all. I have been so pro Treylon Burks over on our Dynasty channel. I've been one of few people who have still been advocating for him. However, I do believe that Robert Woods will, and it's been publicly stated that he will open the year as their wide receiver 1 on this team. They go up against the Giants, who last year, trends aren't always so reliable. We have to think about what happened in free agency and, what moves teams have made through the draft and through trades. But last year, the Giants gave up the 9th most points to fantasy wide receivers. I think they've gotten worse as a defense, in my personal opinion. I know they drafted Kayvon Thibodeau, but guess what? He's not available right now. So they might be better overall. But right now, here in week 1, Kayvon Thibodeau dealing with the knee injury, so there won't be as much pressure on Ryan Tannehill. You also have James Bradbury, who just went to the Eagles. So this team's secondary and their defensive line is not exactly where they want it to be right now. And let's call it what it is. This Tennessee team is going to run through Derrick Henry. That's absolutely going to run through Derrick Henry. However, all reports out of camp have stated that Robert Woods is the clear wide receiver 1 on this team. He will get enough opportunities for you to start him. The ACL is not an issue. He's been developing really good chemistry with Ryan Tannehill. So I would say this is one of my least confident starts for week 1. But I still feel like in a deep league, let's say you can start 5 or 6 wide receivers, then Robert Woods should be an option that you should heavily consider, just purely because of the trust that he has with the team, the connection with Ryan Tannehill, and outside of Treylon Burks, who are we really battling for targets? No one's produced like him on this team. So He's a safe option, a safe floor, not a high ceiling, but a safe floor for deep leagues. So I wasn't so sure about Bobby Trees, but let me tell you someone that I'm very confident that you can start here in week 1, and that is Adam Thielen. ADP this year in drafts, he was going late 6th, early 7th round, was drafted as the wide receiver 29. Last year, from weeks 1 to 12, before his injury, Adam Thielen was the wide receiver 7 overall in PPR formats. If you want to look at a points per game basis, he was wide receiver 9 in that same span. And the only appearance he had last year versus Green Bay, he had over 22 fantasy points where he put up 8 receptions on 10 targets, 82 yards, and a tutty. Adam Thielen should be a very reliable option here in week 1. And we're talking about a Minnesota Vikings team who we have all been discussing all offseason is probably going to be a more pass-focused, pass-happy team now that they have new head coach Kevin O'Connell in town. Remember, he's the same offensive coordinator last year that had Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp firing in that Rams offense. So Adam and Justin Jefferson can and should need to eat in week 1 if they want to beat this Green Bay Packers team. It should be a high-scoring game. Vegas currently has this as at least 6 touchdowns in the game. So Adam Thielen will be necessary for the Vikings to start 1-0 this year if they want to beat those Packers. So start him with confidence as your wide receiver 2, 3, or flex option. For the next wide receiver, I believe you can start with confidence. We're staying in the same matchup, but the opposite side of the ball. Let's talk about Allen Lazard against the Minnesota Vikings. Last year, the Vikings were terrible on defense. They actually gave up the most points per game to the wide receiver position. I understand that there's a lot of changes happening in this organization. The defense should be better. They did sign Jordan Hicks, Zadarius Smith. They drafted Andrew Booth. I'm not sure what his status will be for week 1, but still, this is not a upper echelon like defense to be worried about for your fantasy wide receiver. Now we're talking about Allen Lazard, who is currently, as it stands, Aaron Rodgers' wide receiver 1. Aaron's publicly stated that he believes Allen Lazard will fill that role really nicely. And last year in week 17, in his only appearance versus the Vikings, Lazard scored over 19 points as he put up 72 yards and a tutty. So I think you need to start Allen Lazard with confidence in your flex spot if that is an option for you. You know, in deeper leagues, you know, maybe you have to start him as your wide receiver 2 or 3. But I feel confident enough in Allen Lazard week 1. It's one of those names, we believe, like it's a hype name. I think he's going to return value. Week 1, you should start him. He's done it in the past. Now there should be more opportunity. Start him with confidence. And the last start at the wide receiver position I'm going to give you this week is Gabriel Davis versus the Los Angeles Rams. Look, I have my own hesitations on the Gabe Davis hype this year. I actually don't have any stock in all 20 leagues that I have right now. Maybe that's a downfall of myself, but I don't have any stock of him. But if you drafted him and he's on your team, then you would have drafted him in the 5th round of redraft leagues this year, which means you have to start him. Don't overthink this. They're facing the Los Angeles Rams. We got 2 high-powered offenses facing off versus each other. Right now, Vegas has the over-under at 52.5 points for these teams. So this should be an absolute shootout. What do we think this looks like for Stephon Diggs? I believe Jalen Ramsey will be shadowing him the entire game, which could allow Gabe Davis to be in some relatively favorable positions. And honestly, this game could go either way. If the Bills are to win this game, Gabe Davis needs to have a very good game versus those Rams. So don't overthink it. It's a potential shootout. You drafted him in the 5th round. He is a must start in all formats. And to end the video, I'm going to quickly give you 3 wide receivers that I believe you should leave on your bench for week 1. Now, I kind of cheated with this first one, but whatever. Sit any rookie wide receiver. Okay, I like to employ the wait and see approach for rookie wide receivers when it's the beginning of the season. I mean, even if we talk about one of the best years ever for Justin Jefferson as a rookie, he wasn't fantasy relevant until week 3. It takes a little while for these offenses really to hand the keys to their young wide receivers that they drafted. My second sit is Devonta Smith versus the Detroit Lions. Look, you may have to start Devonta Smith depending on how big your leagues are. I understand, but if you have a better option, I might lean that way this week. Does anyone else remember when the Eagles played the Lions last year? Well, if you don't, let me remind you. The Eagles beat the Lions 44-6, right? You would think probably some wide receiver had fantasy relevance for the Eagles. They put up 44 points. No, nobody. Okay, Boston Scott, 2 touchdowns. Jordan Howard, 2 rushing touchdowns. Devonta Smith, 1 catch for 15 yards on 3 targets. The most fantasy relevant wide receiver for the Eagles that day was Quez Watkins with under 4 fantasy points. So I know a lot of people love Devonta Smith. I love his talent. I just don't like his situation. So last year was a clear number 1. Now you bring in AJ Brown, who will demand targets. Detroit should be beatable on the ground, and this is a team that has had success on the ground. So I don't know if I can trust Devonta Smith just yet. I need to see it before I believe it, and maybe that's my downfall, but I'm personally choosing to sit him. And the last sit is Amari Cooper versus Carolina. Now, look, you might have to start Amari Cooper. I understand that, but again, I'm saying if you have better options, maybe look that way. I'm not worried about his target share. I think he's going to get plenty of opportunities. But Carolina is very underrated as a defense. Last year, the Panthers actually gave up the 6th fewest points to the wide receiver position in fantasy. You got Brian Burns there, Matt Ioannidis, Derek Brown, Jeremy Chin, CJ Henderson, JC Horn is back. Their 8th overall pick in the draft last year, who played really, really well before his injury. I need to wait on Amari until next week. This doesn't feel like the right matchup for me to start him, and I can see a scenario in which Jacoby and this offense just looks really, really sluggish. Look, there are much worse options out there, I understand, like purely because of volume, but he's probably someone I'm passing on this week. So week 1, a lot of unknowns, a lot of things in the air. This is what I am doing. Now, why don't you comment down below and let me know players that you're confidently starting, that you're confidently sitting, or if you have any questions, start sit questions. And by the way, join us your Saturday nights as we go live on this channel and answer start sit questions. So huge love.
Yo, what's good? Thanks for watching. We got a lot more videos.
A lot more.
If you want more videos,
watch it.
You can also subscribe
right now
if you want to.
You need to.
And lastly, don't forget that you can sign up to support the show and get exclusive content by going to patreon.com/FantasyLand fam.